In this video, I'm going to discuss a very interesting tool for data analytics, and that is called a Sankey diagram. A Sankey diagram is one of those tools that you might have never heard about it, but once you hear about it and once you know how to work with it and truly realize the power of it, you kind of don't want to go back, ever. And I noticed that the Sankey diagram is a very underrated feature in certain BI tools, and in certain BI tools, it has very poor features. So in this video, I'm going to make a comparison between two widely used BI tools, namely Microsoft Power BI and Statistical Analytical Systems Visual Analytics, so SAS Visual Analytics, SAS VA. In this case, I'm using SAS VA 7.3 to make my comparison with. And this video I made because I'm struggling to find the equivalent of the features that I can find in SAS. I'm struggling to find that in any other program. So if anybody out there has a way to do this in other programs that is just as well as this program, please let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to hear your alternatives. So let me first explain real short what the Sankey diagram does and the interesting parts of it. So it describes the flows between different events. And the example I'm using here is the events of people traveling between different countries. So you can see people traveling here from Amsterdam, and a certain group travels here to Curacao. And then you have a certain group that travels to a different location, which is Amsterdam again, etc. We can see the different flows of people between the different countries. And that makes it very interesting for analytics, so you can see the flows. And you can use this really for anything. You can use it for travel flows, but you could also use this, for example, if you are working at a hospital and you would like to see how a patient flows throughout a hospital. So first they have an intake, then they have a screening, then they do some diagnostic, and then they end up in the operating room, and gradually they go to aftercare. So you could visualize and quantify such pathways by using a Sankey diagram. This is a Sankey diagram by SAS. And you can see here that the blue ones here means that, the units, the people are dropping off, so they do not continue to the next phase. Whereas the green one here, the 10, the number 10, they go off to different phases. So a few of them here go to Bonaire, a few of them go to Aruba, and a few of them go to Curacao. And the width of these different bands, they indicate the relative amount of people that are taking one type of route over another. And that is really the power of this visualization. I'll show you now the similar visualization in Power BI that I just created. And you can see here, it's very similar, right? So you have different flows of people from Aruba to Curacao and from Curacao to Amsterdam. And you can observe the different flows. So on the surface, you'd say, well, it's very similar software. It's a very similar solution. In Power BI, the Sankey diagram is not native, so you have to download it separately. I have it here as a downloaded feature, but you would get it normally here at Get More Visuals, and then you'd look up the Sankey diagram. So this is the one I downloaded. But my particular problem with the Sankey diagram, as made possible by Power BI, is that it is it's very weak in features compared to the one in SAS. And I'll show you guys the underlying data that I'm using to make these two different visualizations, right? So here, I have the visualization that I'm using for my Power BI analysis. And you can see that there are three columns. There is the from column, so the country where people are traveling from. And here you have the to column. And in column C, you see the amount of passengers for each particular journey. And what a Sankey diagram then does is it translates these things into the diagram. So to give an example, here you have Curacao to Aruba. In total, it's about 6,600 roughly. And if you then look in the Power BI visualization, we can see that for that same route, so let's say Curacao to Aruba, we see here the number matches, right? So it's 656K. So it simply summed those numbers together, and it is now portraying the relative bandwidth or the relative amount of people that take this particular journey from Curacao to Amsterdam. So that is one way to use the Sankey diagram. But that is all nice and well, but the problem in practice is that a Sankey diagram based on these features is not really useful. And I'll show you guys what it looks like in the visualization tools. As you can see here, I can select only a few features. I can select the source, which in my case is the from column, and I can select the destination, which in my case is the to column. So I have from and to. Let me go back here, from and to. And then the weight that defines the fatness of these little strings here is defined by the amount of passengers. If I remove the weight, all the different bands will be in the exact same proportion. So the Sankey diagram, we would like to add the amount of passengers as a weight field here. All right. So this is all very nice and well, but personally, I'm very disappointed in that this is the only features I can do with a Sankey diagram with Power BI. And I've looked up a bunch of videos to see if I can, find anything else to work with. But I'm not satisfied at all with this use of a Sankey diagram. It's very limited, and it really makes you wonder, like, what can I do with this? There's very little I can do with this type of information, and I'll go over that right now. So this is the format the information needs to be in. It only accepts a from column, so a source column in Power BI, and a to column, or a destination column, and a weight column. That's it. And that, in my opinion, is not enough to really unleash the true power of a Sankey diagram. So I'm going to use here an example of, to show the example of SAS here. And SAS has a very advanced Sankey diagram creator. So I'll show you guys the underlying data for the SAS example, which is a lot more common, you find, because again, data like this, you won't find data like this. This is not a common way that systems store data, right? A much more common way for a system to store data, or for you to get data as a data analyst, is to get it in a format that looks something like this. So when we look at this example, you will see the example of my format here is you will have a customer ID. So for example, a passport number. You will have a date of an event, a product name. So let's say economy, first class, economy, etc. I have also a VIP class, so there are 3 classes. The different ticket prices. You can see the different ticket prices. And in this case, we don't have a explicit from and to column. We don't have an explicit from and to destination. We only have a recording of where the person was at a particular time. That's all we know. So this, I called it here the location of the passport scan. So it's not saying from or departure or arrival. It's just saying where the passport was scanned, at what airport the passport was scanned. That's all we get. And that's a very common way that information is generated in data systems. So we get here that this ID here is the same ID. So on 2 different dates, it's the same person, the same customer that is traveling from Aruba to Bonaire on different dates, right? And the same goes for this person here. This is also a different person that travels from Amsterdam to Curacao. This is a person that only travels at least I was only at Amsterdam at some point. And this is what a data set looks like. So it just continues like this. And this is what I would say, a much more common way of getting the data would be like compared to this. You will almost never get data like this from any system unless you would do the manipulations to it yourself. So the power of SAS really is here, and I think they are doing a very poor job at articulating their strengths. I think they're doing a very poor job at that, at marketing their strengths. Because if you look at any SAS presentation on YouTube or a marketing or promotional video, you'll see that they'll focus on things such as, let's make a bar chart, or let's make a timeline chart, right? And I'm like, you know, everybody can make a bar chart, everybody can make a timeline chart. So there's no real point in showing that your software can do that because nobody will be impressed. So, so I think it's a pity really that they don't show off these types of features more, because I'm convinced that if more people knew about features like this, more people would take software like SAS a lot more seriously, and would understand the strengths of software like this. So I'm just going to show you guys real quick what the data looks like. So I'm just going to minimize this one. So just for you guys to confirm, we're talking about the same type of data again here. So it's exactly the same. I just imported this list, this Excel file in SAS for this example. You can see it's the exact same data: customer ID, product name, date, ticket price, and location of passport scan. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to create a new visualization. And this visualization, I'm going to use the Sankey diagram. So it's this feature here. I'm clicking on it. And this, to me, is, I think, where the true power of SAS comes from. And I think a lot more people should know about it. And if anybody has another tool that they can do this with, please let me know, because I would be very happy to find other software that could do the same thing. But I've tried a bunch of different software, a bunch of different things, and haven't been able to find a program that comes quite close to this in the ease. So we have here the Sankey diagram, right? And it asks us more data fields than the Power BI. So remember, in Power BI, it asks us for the from, to, and the weight. So we can see the only thing it has in common with Power BI is the weight. That's the only feature it has in common. What SAS will ask you is, well, give me the sequence order. So what is what makes the sequence? Is it as number or is it dates? In our case, the sequence order are dates. So we're going to use the date column as our sequence order. So that's a very, very important thing. The second thing it will ask you is, what is the event? So is it a purchase? Is it a site visit? Is it a patient going to a different department in the hospital? And what is the event? In our case, the event is the scanning of the passport. So I'm just going to click here at the event on location of passport scan. And then finally, it'll ask us the transaction identifier. What are we going to use to identify our transaction? So I'm going to click here. I need to make another adjustment here. This customer ID needs to go to category. And now that I have it here in category, I can drag and drop the customer ID, which is my transaction identifier, here. Now I have a beautiful Sankey diagram. And what it is doing here, I'm just going to close this part here. What it is doing now is that it is creating an artificial sequence of events. If you have a lot of data, it will just create an artificial sequence displaying a generalization of the most common flows of a certain event. And you can see here very specifically that people move from Amsterdam to Aruba, and then a few of them go to Bonaire, and then some of them make it to Amsterdam. And you can see the exact flows of the different travelers in our case, and see how they flow through our things. And again, this is a very powerful tool because you get to convert data. You get to convert the data that originally looks like this. The data looks just like this. And we get to convert that into this beautiful looking Sankey diagram. Whereas in Power BI, I'm limited to only using data that looks like this. And this is, to me, I'm not sure whether I should be really disappointed in Microsoft Power BI or whether I should be very impressed by SAS. So um, all I can say is that it's a very powerful feature, and once you work with it in SAS, you really want to keep using it. And for me, it's at least for me, this is a very strong reason to keep using SAS over other BI tools, because again, many of the other things I can do in many BI tools, like making bar charts, making line charts, make all, you know, it's standard material. But making a Sankey diagram like this, especially with big volumes of data, I haven't seen any any other BI tool that can do this really. So let me just show you another few cool features of this here. Let's say that I am not interested in the stream necessarily of people. So you can see this is people, 10, 5, 16, etc. So these are 10 individuals. But I'm more interested in the flow of money, so based on ticket prices. So I can change the weight here, for example, to ticket prices. And based on what is relevant for your business, you can then adjust your flows accordingly. Because, for example, in healthcare, you will sometimes find that, well, a very small number of patients might be causing a very large amount of cost or revenues for your hospital or for your insurer. And so therefore, it's not always useful to only look at the amount of patients, but it's sometimes also useful to look at the money flows between department, or the money flow between different entities. And this can be really anything. It can be, again, it can be a hospital, a pharmacy, a radiology center. It can be a website, a landing page of a website, the cart of the website, the About Us page, the Contact Us page on the website, and finally the selling page of the website, right? So you can use it for a lot of different things. I'm going to remove this right now. Another interesting feature of this is, well, let's say I'm only interested in people that started their journey in Amsterdam. So in SAS, I can just click on it, add a new condition, and I say, well, my condition needs to start with, end with, or contain. So I'm just going to click start with. I'm going to choose, it needs to start with Amsterdam. And I click OK. So as you can see here, the whole visualization has now adjusted to depict only the people that started their journey in Amsterdam. You can see how the different flows of the different individuals move. And why is this important? Again, because in a big data environment, let's say, again, in healthcare, I might have hospital data, but I get a whole lot of different events that have happened to different patients. But I'm only interested in the patient that, for example, had during their pathway a operation, so that ended up at some point on the operating table. And by using filters such as this, so by using these types of conditions, I can get a good idea about my data and then add them. Let me show you just this, this detailed page of SAS where we can review the underlying calculations that have been done, basically. So as you can see here, what SAS is doing is very similar to the format that we are feeding Power BI in, that we had the from node and the to node, and that it is by itself calculating all these particular things. So it is by itself converting the data from from this format here, it's converting the data from this format into a format similar to this, with where it specifies the nodes and the paths. See, so it has different names for the different paths. It has different nodes. It has different particular designations for the node, the drop off, the amount of drop off, the frequency. But the powerful thing is that it automatically converts it. That's the real beauty of SAS. So you can see here, this one here starts with Amsterdam, but I can also, for example, remove this. And if I say, for example, well, I want another condition where it says it needs to include, contain, it needs to contain Curacao. And you'll see again, the visualization has slightly changed to showcase the journeys that contain Curacao. Conversely, I can also say I want the journeys that end with a trip to Bonaire. Okay, so here we can see the opposite. We can see all the different pathways that, according to my data, have ended with a trip to Bonaire. And we can also visually verify if this is true, because I took a few, I checked here some cases. So just to show for this example, where I manually checked certain cases. So you can see I made a pivot table here with the ID here, the year, and the different dates. And this ID, for example, started its journey at Amsterdam. This the first column here is Amsterdam. This one, same thing, started its journey in Amsterdam. And you can count that, and you can manually check if what you see here in the Sankey diagram makes sense. So again, if we compare that with the very basic features that we have here we can only select from and to. There's very little I can do here. I can't add any conditions. The options are really limited. And I can imagine that if you are starting out in data science or data visualizations, and you look up a Sankey diagram, you're curious about it, and you're gonna Google it or YouTube it, and you find examples of how to do it in Power BI, you will probably not find a useful application for it. And you will discard this beautiful visualization and not look any further into it. And that's really a pity, I think, because it's such a cool feature to have. And yeah, I think SAS is really underselling this in their software. I haven't seen any promotional video of SAS where they explain this or explain what to do with it. So to me, it's basically a hidden gem in SAS. So I also looked up some examples of if we look at the Sankey diagram here, Sankey diagram Power BI, and you see that all the examples here, I mean I've went to a lot of them, all all use the same data type that we have here. So all of them in their example use a data type similar to this, which again, in my opinion, is not a common way for data to be found. And so yeah, I also looked in different programs. So for example, Sankey diagram in R. Well, I looked at it, took a look at it. Same problem, they use the same type of data as in the examples as mentioned here, as depicted here, same type of data and a lot of coding compared to SAS Visual Analytics, where I can just drag and drop and it's a lot more easy to work with. So I haven't really been able to find any other satisfactory alternatives to this solution by SAS. So I'm very curious to know if anybody out there has an alternative that works, that gives me data like this. And if you have never analyzed data like this before, I really recommend you take a look at it. And I hope maybe maybe either other BI tools will pick up on this type of visualization, or at least the calculations needed to get to this type of visualization, because again, SAS converts the data from this year. It converts it to this beautiful looking Sankey diagram. So I'm very curious if anybody has any suggestions yet, and I'm looking forward to read your comments and your suggestions. Thank you.